Hey YouTube, I'm Wade from Everyday Sustainable. Today's inauguration day, and I thought what better day to talk about the first 100 days of Biden's administration and what that means from an environmental point of view. We'll talk about the goals Biden and his team have already set, what we hope to see, and why that's so important. So let's jump right in. Naturally, in today's video, we're going to talk politics. I don't intend to say that Republicans are all to blame or that Democrats have all the answers or anything along those lines. The fact is, regardless of who we are, where we're from, or what we believe, we all share some of the blame for our current climate crisis. And therefore, we're all responsible to do something about it. If you're still unsure about climate change, I would encourage you to look into the money. The Koch brothers alone have spent $145 billion trying to convince us that climate change isn't real. ExxonMobil as well has spent hundreds of billions of dollars. There's links in the description below if you want to read more about those things. But is it really any question why oil companies would want to convince us that climate change isn't real? 97% of scientists say it is real. So perhaps it's real, and we're already feeling the effects today. I would be remiss to not mention that in the US, the Republican Party has largely been the ones denying climate change. And the stats bear that out. A Pew poll found that 86% of Democrats think that climate change is a huge issue, while only 23% of Republicans would agree with that. That's a huge difference. But the fact is, I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, if you're from the US or another country, it doesn't matter. What I'm really trying to say is one of this channel's guiding principles. We can't affect serious change through name calling, finger pointing, blaming, and shaming one another. If you're here because you desire to be a part of the solution, then you're in the right place.
The Biden plan.
Well, thanks, Joe. So what is the Joe Biden plan? He was careful to differentiate his plan from the Green New Deal on the campaign trail. Really, this is more semantics than anything, as the Green New Deal isn't a specific plan. If you want to read the full plan for yourself, I put a link to it in the description. It's quite lengthy, so I'm just going to give you some highlights here. First, we'll start with some long-term goals. There are 3 long-term goals I will be highlighting. The first is achieving a 100% clean energy economy with net zero emissions by 2050. 2050 is really long-term, way beyond Joe Biden's time in the White House. The plan says that Biden will achieve this goal through demanding legislation from Congress to ensure that we reach the goal by 2050 by the end of Biden's first presidential term. The legislation that Biden says he will demand from Congress will 1. Ensure we hit our emission goals through putting specific mechanisms in place to keep us on track. 2. Invest greatly in our clean energy economy. And 3. Incentivize rapid development of clean energy technologies. The second long-term goal is a $1.7 trillion investment from the US federal government in our clean energy economy over the next 10 years. Again, this is a long-term goal. It would go beyond even Biden's second term. The plan also says that this money will be leveraged to get additional investments from the private sector, bringing the total up to $5 trillion, a huge investment in our clean energy economy, which would go a long ways towards meeting goal number 1. The third and final long-term goal we'll discuss today is holding major polluters responsible. The plan notes that the EPA referred the fewest lawsuits to the Justice Department under the Trump administration as it has in the past 30 years, implying that the Trump administration did not hold polluters responsible, and Biden's administration plans to do the opposite. Importantly, this part of the plan discusses the way environmental burdens and benefits have been unfairly distributed across racial and socioeconomic lines, not just in terms of climate change, but also in terms of pollution of land, air, and water. On the note of water, it's hard not to think of a place like Flint, Michigan that was without clean drinking water for 5 years. But it's not just water, it's also the air we breathe. The plan notes that African Americans are 3 times as likely as their white counterparts to die from asthma-related complications. Further, the plan notes that half of Latinos live in counties whose air does not meet the EPA's standards for clean and healthy air. I personally live in one of these counties where the air is not clean, and half of our residents are Hispanic. I can say that the data rings true here, and asthma is prevalent. I used to have to use an inhaler as a kid, and that was not uncommon. Most kids at my schools had to use inhalers because the air is so bad. Not to mention the air is getting worse because of all the wildfires. So there are 3 long-term goals in the Biden plan. Transitioning to short-term, and I mean short-term, like day 1, there are 11 goals that the Biden plan says that they want to accomplish on the first day in office. So maybe they've already happened. Does it count January 20th, or do we not start counting till the 21st? Well, let's give them till the 21st. Maybe put those pitchforks away for now. But if these 12 things haven't happened by January 22nd, well, we may need the pitchforks. Anyway, here are the 11 day 1 goals. 1. Use full executive authority to reduce emissions. 2. Ensure all new federal vehicles are zero-emission vehicles. 3. Ensure efficiency in federal buildings. 4. Limit transportation emissions through the existing Clean Air Act. 5. Set standards for light and heavy-duty truck emissions. 6. Invest in biofuel development. 7. Develop new appliance and building efficiency standards. 8. Require that all new federal infrastructure projects account for climate change and emissions impact. 9. Require private companies to disclose climate risk in operation. 10. Preserve biodiversity and conserve America's land and water. 11. Rejoin the Paris Climate Accord. So those are the day 1 goals of Biden's climate change plan. But what about the rest of the first 100 days of Biden's administration? Well, the Biden plan acknowledges that the Paris Climate Accord is not enough, even though he will be rejoining it day 1. You see, the countries in the Paris Climate Accord are not even meeting the emissions standards that they set for themselves in the Paris Climate Accord, not to mention that those goals are insufficient to battle the climate crisis we currently face. So the Biden plan says that within the first 100 days, his administration will convene a summit with the largest carbon emitting nations and persuade them to join the US in setting more aggressive goals and put mechanisms in place for punishing countries that don't meet their goals. It remains to be seen what exactly those punishments and restrictions would look like on countries not meeting their goals, but hopefully we do see a summit convened and agreements reached. The fact is, the US only contributes 15% of total carbon emission in the whole world. So Biden, in order to have a major impact on climate change, needs to convince other world leaders to join him and the US in this fight against climate change. It would be huge to see this happen in Biden's first 100 days. The next goal we'll discuss that the Biden plan says his administration will accomplish in the first 100 days is reforming the International Monetary Fund, or IMF. This organization funds development projects around the world, and the Biden administration wants to connect climate impact to receiving those funds. In other words, a country that's a heavy polluter or a project that's not eco-friendly, produces lots of greenhouse gases, would be moved to the back of the line to receive funds for their projects. Therefore, countries will be incentivized to make sure they're meeting their emission standards, and projects will have to take into account climate impact when applying for dollars through the IMF. The final goal we'll discuss today that Biden promises to accomplish in his first 100 days is demanding an end to fossil fuel subsidies. The US currently subsidizes fossil fuels at about $20 billion per year, and the number estimated around the globe is $5 trillion. Ending those $5 trillion that are currently subsidizing fossil fuels would go a long ways towards transitioning the globe to a clean air economy, especially when we remember that the Biden plan promises to invest $1.7 trillion into transitioning the US and countries around the globe towards clean air economies. This would make a huge impact, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about why these plans are important. Why do the first 100 days of Biden's administration matter from a climate change perspective? Well, first, it will make up for lost time. I am referring to the 4 years of Trump's administration, who pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accord, rolled back emission standards, opened up new land to pipelines, drilling, and mining for a total of 84 different EPA standards that his administration rolled back. back. I do mean those 4 years that the Biden administration needs to make up for, but I also mean the lost time of most of our lives. You see, the reality is most fossil fuel burning has happened since the UN established the climate change framework in 1992. We can't afford to keep polluting our earth more. We need to start decreasing emissions, and that is why Biden's lofty goals are so important and necessary. The second reason why Biden's first 100 days in the White House are so important from a climate change perspective is simply because what we do today shapes our tomorrow. The amount of fossil fuels we burn today directly affects the livability of our planet tomorrow. You may have heard the timeline of 12 years. We have 12 years to act drastically. This 12-year timeline is quite common, but the fact is it's actually kind of complicated. If you want to read more about this, I put a couple links down in the description. Check those out. That kind of language actually misleads us sometimes because it makes it feel as though we have a dichotomy. We either do nothing and we're doomed in 12 years, or we do something and we're safe. Like climate change is some kind of a light switch that we can just turn off and turn on. It's not that simple, it's complicated. The reality is the more fossil fuels we burn, the more the globe will heat. The less fossil fuels we burn, the more catastrophe we will prevent. We're already seeing the effects of climate change. It's not as though we can turn it off. The third and final reason Biden's first 100 days in office are so important from a climate change perspective, because they will set the tone for his presidency. If he's unable to meet his 11 day one goals, if he's unable to convene this summit with other world leaders, if he's unable to cut funding to fossil fuel subsidies, if he's unable to do those things, how will he accomplish his long-term goals? How will he invest $1.7 trillion into our economy? How will he get us to 100% clean energy by 2050? He needs to set the tone for our future. Those are the 3 reasons why Biden's first 100 days are so important. Make up for lost time, what we do today shapes tomorrow, and setting the tone for his presidency. So far, Biden's talking the talk. He has a very aggressive plan and several people in his cabinet focused on climate change. But only time will tell. Is it all talk, or is he serious about accomplishing these goals? If he's not, you may need to get those pitchforks handy. If you made it with me this far, thank you for bearing with the politics talk. I won't do this in every video, but I do believe that these conversations are important because no amount of individual lifestyle change can have the impact that we need. That said, our individual lives are the outflowing of the kind of world we want to live in, so I believe those conversations matter too. If you want to be a part of this conversation with me, please consider subscribing, clicking the bell to get notified when I release a new video. May we be better citizens of the world today and every day. See you next time.